Hello architects and developers, and welcome back to another video on the patterns of building event-driven systems. In this video today, as you might have seen from the very clickbaity title, we're going to talk about a very naughty word. Come to that in a second. One of the most commonly touted benefits you will see as you start to learn about event-driven systems is evolvability. Adopting event-driven architecture allows you to be evolvable and extensible. You can just add new consumers without your producers realizing it. You can do that to your heart's content and everything is all glorious and wonderful. Until, of course, it isn't. The ease at which many messaging systems let you publish events is actually one of its downfalls. EventBridge, RabbitMQ, Kafka, whichever one you're using, you just define a payload of some kind, an event format, typically JSON, and you just send that to the service. And then you define your consumer and your consumer pulls down that. Job done. Dust your hands. Everybody's happy. Now, if you saw my last video on event first design, and if you didn't, I'd recommend going to check that out now. Hopefully you are aware of the importance of good schema management. And this is, of course, the most important part of an event-driven system. It's easy to just publish events, but without good oversight in place, you are going to very quickly lose that evolvability that led you to adopt event-driven architecture in the first place because, breaking changes and all that. So what can you do? And this is where I want to come back to this very, very naughty word. And I apologize to all of you watching in advance for the shivers that this word is about to send down your spine. Are you ready? That word is, of course, governance. Yeah, terrifying, isn't it? Governance is incredibly important in event-driven architecture, though. And although that word might send shivers down your spine, it doesn't need to be a terrifying thing. Of course, when you think of governance, you think of bureaucracy and red tape and approval boards and change management, and it doesn't need to be like that. You can do governance in a way with event-driven architecture that allows you to keep a flexible, lovely process that you're used to. And you can do that with something that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And that is, of course, the RFC process, the request for change process. If you are a producer of an event and you need to change that event for whatever reason, you can raise an RFC to do that. You see, I've got a sample RFC here, and the RFC is to update the stock price updated event. It's going to be a breaking change to that event structure, and then you can actually dive into details about why you're making the change, the motivation, exactly what it is that's going to change. So you see, here's the current version of the stock price updated event that has a stock price and a value. The new version of the event is going to change that stock price to add the currency as well. That is the reason for making this change, is that you need to start adding the currency as part of the stock price management system that you're building. One other really important that's included in this RFC is a note that the first version of the event will continue to be published until the start of April. This gives any consumers of this event an opportunity to be able to comment, to add their feedback. And if there is no feedback, then you assume that everybody who's interested in this event is fine with the change, and you just go ahead and make the change. So this allows you to start to add some element of governance to your event-driven system to govern the schemas of these events and talk about any changes without actually causing lots and lots of pain and terror and bureaucracy to all of your development teams. So it's a really useful process. Coupled with that governance process is the ability to version your event. So as you go about making these kinds of breaking changes, you want to be able to version so that you can publish multiple versions of the same event and give your downstream consumers the opportunity to subscribe to version 1 and then over time migrate to version 2. And there's a couple of ways that you can actually do that. One of which is to adopt the cloud events specification for the structure of your event. So this cloud event spec is a really specific, really detailed specification for how to structure your events. And there's an example here. You include things like the type of event, the source system that the event came from, the actual data, the actual payload of the event. And if you've seen any of my other videos or my other talks, you'll have heard me talk about the metadata data pattern, which is another way of doing this, of structuring your event schema in a way that gives you the ability to make changes to the event. And let's actually have a look at this in practice. I've got an example .NET application here. If you're not a .NET developer, don't worry, you can stick around. You'll still get some value from this. And actually, as part of a cross-cutting concern here, I've got a shared library that's used for publishing and managing events. And you'll notice I've got this event wrapper object. This event wrapper contains a metadata and a data property. So I'm not using cloud events here. I'm using this very simple metadata data pattern. And the metadata object includes things like the event ID, the trace ID for the publishing system, and really importantly, a version number. So whenever an event gets sent, it includes a version number that downstream consumers can use. So this allows me to wrap all of my events up. I've actually got this code in a shared library so that teams using this library, developers across my entire organization, don't need to worry about that event wrapper. If you actually look at my publish method on my event bus, all it takes in is this event type. So the publish interface is just taking a generic event. If you have a look at where this event bus is actually used, you see that when I hit this publish method to actually publish a version of my event, all I'm publishing is a stock price updated event. As a user of this service, I don't need to care about that metadata data pattern as a producer. I'm just saying I want to publish a stock price updated event. When that event publisher is actually implemented, the code that actually interacts in this case with Amazon EventBridge, you'll notice that that event wrapper is then added by the abstraction. So developers are just publishing events that are relevant to their system, and the abstraction adds the wrapper around that. This could equally be a wrapper to add the cloud events specification as opposed to the metadata data pattern. What that means is that in my actual application code, so I'm in my application code here that's actually going to update the stock price. And you see at the minute, I've got this stock price updated event that I'm publishing. When it comes time for me to make the breaking change, I can simply add a second version of my event. So I've now got this stock price updated event V2 that sets the event version to V2. So V1 with the event version set to V1, V2 with the event version to set to V2. Back in my handler now, I can now publish both the stock price updated event, which is going to be version 1 of the event, and then further along, I can publish version 2 of the event as well. So in my application code, I'm just publishing version 1 and version 2 of the same event. Once that hits the actual implementation behind the scenes of this, that version 1 and version 2 in the metadata of the published event payload is going to be set correctly. And because I'm using Amazon EventBridge under the hood here, which takes multiple events in a single API call, publishing these 2 events is going to add very little overhead relative to just publishing 1 event. So this is a really neat way of enabling consumers to interact with both versions of your event. So now my publishing system, my producing system, is publishing these 2 different variations of the event. And I've actually set this up to log data to CloudWatch. So if I come over to the AWS console now, to the log group for this set stock price endpoint, and I look at my latest log group, and I'm just going to grab these 2 log messages and move them over into Visual Studio Code. And you see now, looking at the actual message, the actual event that was published, the first pieces are identical. You've got your metadata section, you've got a unique event ID, there's no tracing enabled at this moment in time. You've got the published date, the date the event was generated, the type of event, all identical. And then, of course, you've got the version field here for version 1 and version 2. Then when you get into the data property, the first version of the event just includes the stock symbol and the price. And then the second version includes the stock symbol, the price, and the currency as that new event format. So coupling that RFC process with this ability to publish multiple versions of events is actually what allows you to have evolvability and extensibility. Just blindly publishing events into your event book with a complete disregard for how people and how consumers are going to do that and how you're going to change your system over time is setting you up for a painful experience in the future. So as you're getting started with event-driven systems, make sure you use some kind of sensible schema to give you that ability to evolve and change over time, because even if you think your system's never going to change, it definitely is. I can promise you that things will change over time. It is the only constant in software. So think about governance, think about including some kind of RFC process to help you make changes to your events. And when it actually comes to publishing events, make sure you include some kind of versioning information so that you can version these events for your consumers. That's all for this video. I will see you in the next one.